So I want to thank my next guest who is joining us. You can see her on the screen there. And, on this show, we've had conversations with a PhD in athletic performance. I spoke to a trainer that trains UFC guys and MLB guys. We've had conversations with numerous fighters, with physical therapists, and they all basically said the same thing. Nutrition is the most important factor when it comes to performance. And so that's why I'm so excited to, have our next guest on, because most of us have coaches when it comes to jujitsu, Muay Thai, strength and conditioning, or whatever. And then we're like, hey, what should I eat? I'm like, well, hell, I don't know. Like a protein bar sounds good. Right. And so Layli, who is here joining us, she helps fighters get ready, gets them through training camp. And like the stuff that she cooks is actually good. So it's not like just eat chicken and rice, right? Like she makes stuff that tastes delicious, but actually helps you perform better as well. So Layli, thank you for coming on.
Yes. Hello.
Perfect. So I want to, kind of start with a question. I was kind of rolling through your Instagram and I noticed that, you recently had a child, and I saw you doing Muay Thai when you were pregnant. So,
Yes.
So my question is, how hard is it to kick when you're pregnant?
That's such a good question, and really hard, because your whole body just shifts. And you're really like, that's why I was continuing to hit pads. You're trying to maintain some normalcy, especially with your first kid. You really just are trying to maintain your personality while you're pregnant. And so it's really frustrating. Your whole body's shifting. You have to move your hips up and around to throw kicks and, hit pads for 30 seconds and need a break. But definitely a good way to relieve some of that stress and anxiety and, just keep yourself centered during that time.
Absolutely, for sure. All right. So yes, we did not come here to talk about, Muay Thai and training when you're pregnant, right? Again, you're an expert in getting fighters ready, in fight camps and through nutrition and delicious foods and that kind of stuff. So, how did you really get into being a personal chef and helping fighters get ready for camps?
Yeah, I've always had, my background is in health science. I was an educator for a lot of years, but I always had this passion for fitness and for training. My now husband and I opened a gym, and we really found that it was hard to maintain a consistent training schedule, to push yourself frequently in these training sessions without properly fueling. At the time, we didn't have a lot of money. We were just grabbing things as we went on. And so it became kind of a personal project of mine to just really start to understand food and break it down. And how do those macros that we've studied, how does that actually apply to the food? So I did that for years while I was teaching. And then, I did get pregnant. I didn't want to continue to teach and, raise my kid. I wanted to start something where I could, help other people and something that I was really passionate about. So I started off as a meal prep company, just getting food out to people. It was a nice transition, but I knew that I wanted to work with fighters. That was always my passion. I'm a huge MMA fan. And I just really knew that if we paired the training that we were working with strength and conditioning with the nutrition, then it could be really powerful. And I got really lucky from there to meet up with George Lockhart, go through his certification, have the opportunity to go out to UFC events, work with fighters, and kind of pair those two things together, the food and the nutrition with these like weight cut methods and these scientific protocols. And it really just came together beautifully. And the fun thing about that was there was a need for it. Fighters really needed, this answer. And so it really just kind of grew and evolved from there, where I've really gotten to kind of hone in and become really niche and meet the needs of fighters. So it's been a really cool process, and I'm lucky that I've been able to do it.
For sure. As you mentioned, you've worked with a number of UFC fighters. I know some guys like to keep you like their trade secret that they don't share, but are there any fighters that you've worked with that you can, kind of tell us about how you worked with them?
Yeah, I mean, I would say every fighter is different. And to be very honest, I've really kind of refined and evolved what I've been doing from the beginning. So each camp really looks a little bit different in terms of what the fighter needs. It's really about finding out what they're comfortable with. A lot of these guys at the top of their game, like you said, they're not used to having a nutrition coach. They kind of have these patterns of eating. So really learning where people are willing to work on, where you kind of need to gradually work them into to meet their needs, right? Just telling somebody what to eat, it's more than just following the numbers. It's really about kind of applying it to the emotional side and what people are willing to change in camp. So I would say that they've all been really different. I don't know if I could pick one camp just to talk about.
Sure. So I'm sure a lot of us make mistakes when it comes to nutrition and training and that sort of stuff. What are some of the biggest ones that you see over and over that most fighters are making?
You know, the biggest thing, and this is really why I'm so passionate about the food and the nutrition side of it, is fighters are training 2 to 3 times a day, but they're also trying to make weight. And so what I really see, and this is really common, not just in fighters, but just in people in general, is that there's a big restriction. You know, they'll eat 900 calories a day, 1100 calories a day. They have to make up for that somewhere. They're burning between 3,500 to 4,000 calories. So where's that being put back in? And then that usually comes from maybe a binge or an overeating session where that slows digestion, it slows down energy, or they just grab something so quick because they're starving that they need to meet their body's needs. So I'd say that's the most common thing is either, you know, withholding too many calories or eating too many, and then you're kind of stuck in this cycle. So, you know, a lot of times our goal is to break that and to you know, make the planning ahead for eating, making eating more consistent, making sure you have those meals and snacks available for you. That's a lot of what we're doing in camps, is actually getting fighters to eat more and fuel more.
Yeah, no, I've definitely made that mistake where I was like, all right, I gotta cut a bunch of weight. And so I started eating cauliflower rice all the time, which
Yeah,
is a perfectly healthy alternative. However, there's not a lot of calories in it. And
yeah.
like at the end of the day, I was just getting smashed. And I'm like, why the hell am I getting smashed? And I realized like I literally had no energy because that's basically all I was eating.
Yeah, yeah, it's super common. And then you need that output. You know, a lot of carbohydrates get such a bad rap, or meat gets such a bad rap. You've got all these different paleo, Whole30 diets, and people are really looking at restriction. We're looking about taking things out of diets. And I'm kind of that anti-diet culture. I'm trying to put things back in. You know, I want you eating protein throughout the day. I want you eating carbohydrates throughout the day. But it's really just looking at what types of carbohydrates are you using? Are you using fast-acting carbohydrates after your training? Are you using those more complex carbohydrates before bed so your body can sustain and fuel through the night? So kind of breaking down those things for people is really helpful so they can understand, what am I using during the day and how am I putting it back in?
So, I mean, based on your last answer, I think I know the answer to my next question, but what do you
Okay.
think about fighters that, you know, try keto or carnivore, or, you know, something in between those two, and still trying to maintain a high level of performance?
You know, I think if it works for you, a lot of people are like, yeah, but it works for me. And if it works for you, that's fantastic. I think a lot of times those things aren't long term. I don't think it's necessarily sustainable. And I think, like I said, you're taking something out of your diet instead of putting something back in. So if you are taking out a meat source as protein, you know, how are you meeting those needs? And some people are good about that, making sure they're getting their B vitamins and protein in other ways. But ultimately, I think people stick to those diets because they're looking for rules. That's kind of one of my goals, is to rewrite those rules and give people something concrete to follow, you know, that where we're not taking out so much.
Yeah, and you know, you're right, like you find those rules, you fall into patterns, right? And you end up like eating the same thing 3 or 4 times a week, if not more,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because it's easy and it's simple. But how do you, or I guess the question is, you know, what foods would you recommend so that we can start to think in different ways and introduce new foods into our diets?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just a really big proponent of whole foods. Foods, real foods. And if you are going to buy something, you know, store bought, making sure that you look at those ingredients and actually know what's in there. So if you're getting a protein bar, is it the whey protein isolate, some nuts, some other things? It's not full of garbage. That's really, at the end of the day, if it's a whole food. And so I really encourage people to kind of explore and look at what you like. What sources of proteins do you like that you're realistically going to eat? Same thing with carbohydrates. Are you going to choose rice or sweet potatoes? What are you actually going to eat? Because yeah, like you said, that you know, people end up getting into these really mundane or repetitive eating patterns that, again, we were looking for sustainability. We want to teach fighters to fuel themselves for a lifetime and not necessarily just for, you know, a 6 to 8 week camp. So yeah, I mean, I just see so many, like, that's like, if you notice on my page, the food, I love food. So I don't want to see dried chicken, and I don't want to see half of a sweet potato with nothing on it. I want to make sure that you're eating, because then a lot of times when you break out of that pattern, people don't really know where to go. It can cause anxiety where, you know, if they have a brownie, they're like, oh my gosh, I fell off this plan and now I have anxiety and I have to punish myself for it. When really, truly, you just want to eat something good, and you deserve to.
So that actually brings up a good question. Let's say you're not in camp. It's just kind of, you know, everyday training. how often should you mix in like something amazing like a bacon double cheeseburger versus eating like, kind of the normal, fairly healthy training kind of diet?
Yeah, 100%. I'd say it's two different answers, whether you're in camp or whether you're out of camp. If you're out of camp, I like that 80-20 rule. 80% of the time you're staying consistent, you're planning ahead, you're eating whole foods, and then that 20% when you're going out or you're having a holiday, you're having a craving, being able to meet that need is really important. And cravings a lot of time is your body asking you for something. I have a lot of fighters, I crave sugar, because they need more sugar. And we literally are adding that back in through dextrose to making sure that they need it. Their body's asking for it. And sometimes we misread those cues. If you're in camp, depending on how big your weight cut is, sometimes there's more cheat days. I usually, let's say if we're in an 8-week camp, I usually try to write in at least 2 cheat days and then adding a couple things in, a couple treats in during the weight cut just to mentally stay in it and make sure, that you're doing all right.
All right. So I think literally the biggest question I had in my mind is, all right, chicken breast versus chicken thighs. Because I'm not going to lie, chicken thighs taste way better than chicken breasts. Where do you fall on that?
Yeah, it's all about the fat, right? So that's why chicken thighs are so good. That's why they stay juicier. I include fat in almost all of my meals. The range is for macros, and that's what I work with athletes on is how much fat should you be eating throughout the day? What does that look like when you portion it into meals and snacks? So chicken thighs are great. It's a good source of protein. It's a good source of fat. If I'm using chicken breasts, I usually add some fat somewhere else, whether that's from avocados or coconut milk or nuts, just adding some sort of, fat source in there. So if you're really looking to specifically get down, into the macros, then you might have a preference over chicken thighs or chicken breasts. But I prefer thighs.
Okay, good. So I'm just making sure so I can keep doing what I'm doing with the chicken thighs. Just
yeah.
Some confirmation on that. All right. So we talked about, some of the things that you should be eating. Are there foods that you 100% should for sure avoid?
I just really highly processed foods or really greasy foods. It's just going to slow down your digestion. It's going to kind of disrupt what you're doing. Your body can only take so many carbohydrates. So even if you have a whole healthy day and then you eat McDonald's, your body's just going to kind of absorb that and use that. And it's just you're going to feel that for the next 2 or 3 days. Maybe younger athletes, maybe you'll recover a little bit quickly, but once you're, late 20s, early 30s, you might start feeling like it's going to impact your performance and you're going to feel that the next day. So those things I'd really stay away from. In fight camps, like I said, those cheat days, just making sure that those are coming from whole foods. If you want to have a nice steak or you want to have, some fries, just baking some potatoes with steak, maybe having some gravy or a little something with dessert, just making sure that those they're coming from good sources.
Okay. So I think I mentioned this earlier, right? I had a fairly big weight cut and I was just basically eating like cauliflower rice and then I was getting crushed because I had literally no energy. How do you, safely in a healthy way start to cut weight, but not lose the strength and power that you need to continue to train, to build muscle, all those kind of things?
Yeah, definitely. That's where the sweet spot of the science comes in. So, every athlete has a different output during the day, depending on their job, what they're doing, how many training sessions that they have. So it's really a matter of looking at what are you using during the day. If you're sitting at a desk and then you have some training sessions, maybe an hour of intense training, the majority of what you're burning throughout the day is fat. So that's what you want to be putting back in. So that's where you would have things like chicken thighs and almonds and things throughout the day, whole eggs, to make sure that you're getting that fat. So you're fueling what your body's actually using. If you're in that description that, in that setting and you keep having carbohydrates, you're going to notice those insulin spikes, your weight's not going to transition as smoothly. So really just understanding what your body's using throughout the day. A lot of these professional athletes, they're training 3 sessions with rests in between. So we want to make sure that we're fueling carbohydrates all throughout the day. So then they have that output as they're training. Like I mentioned before, a big thing is the recovery with dextrose. It's a really fast acting sugar. I think most fighters need to be on it and a lot of them aren't. So a lot of what I do is kind of get fighters used to using that, learning how to reload with with that glycogen. So then when you get into your next training sessions, you're really fueled and ready to go. And it's a really that balance and understanding those numbers, your weight starts to come down and your muscle mass is fueled. Your muscles are fueled. So you have more muscle in the end to kind of fuel that weight cut. Typically in camps, I like to, it depends on the numbers, but let's say it's a 20-pound cut. I want to see 10 come off naturally, and then I want to cut the other 10 through water weight and those other strategies that we use come fight week.
Okay. And when you talk about, adding dextrose back into your diet and you just kind of fuel you, are you using more supplements for that or using specific foods to get those nutrients?
Yeah, dextrose. So I really don't use too many. Like I like beta alanine, creatine, those kind of supplements. The dextrose I do use in a powder form. I use either a dextrose powder, or I like to combine it with dextrose. And sometimes if guys are sweating a little bit more, training a little bit more, then we're putting sodium and potassium back in. They might have, more glycogen depletion during their training sessions.
Okay, that makes sense. So, what we've been talking about, kind of getting ready for the fight, let's say you have, so a lot of jujitsu guys, right? We do day of weigh-ins instead of day before weigh-ins. So how do you time that so you're not just totally smoked by the day of and, totally depleted and still have enough energy to fight, but can still cut a fair amount of weight?
Yeah, in those situations, cutting less is always really just the answer. If you're depleting your body that much, you really need time to recuperate, to put things back in. One of the things that is really important with the weight cut is the recovery drinks. So just putting back, measuring how much sweat you lose during the week, how much glycogen you lost from your muscles, putting all that back in. We usually do that in 3 liters of recovery drinks, and then plus supplementing with water, more quick carbohydrate snacks and meals after that. So it is a whole process. It's like a 24-hour process that we use to reload, for typical fights. So when that time is shortened, really reducing that weight cut, making sure that you're getting those recovery drinks, knowing what you took out of your body so you can put that back in and be ready to compete as soon as possible.
And so, when you talk about those recovery drinks, I know, some people use things like cherry juice, or they use, coconut water or coconut water powder as part of their recovery. What kind of things do you typically add into those recovery drinks that you have after weigh-in?
Yeah, definitely. So during fight week, we take out sodium. And so one of those things is we measure how much sodium that the body lost during that cut. And so we put that back in. So in the recovery drinks is sodium. So how much sodium did you lose? And then the coconut water for potassium, sodium, potassium work together. We also use caffeine just to help kind of get that in quicker, and then water. A lot of times people use BCAAs. Sometimes I'll add those in after. It just kind of depends on the athlete, just depends on the cut. And then really the important thing is just pairing that with the water. So making sure that you're not just dumping salt into water, making sure that you're really diluting it so your body can use it without, getting the shits or making yourself sick or something like that. Those things are really common. So you kind of have to be careful about how you're putting those things back in. And then same thing, once you get that hydration drink back in, quick salty snacks are really important. I like granola bars or veggie sticks or something where you get quick, your body's going to use it quickly, can use those carbohydrates, and it's replenishing carbs and salt as quickly as possible.
And on the fluids, I've heard that it's better to do room temperature versus cold because your body can kind of break everything down more quickly. Is that what you've seen, or does it not matter?
I actually haven't heard that. I always go with ice cold, or not ice cold, but cold. I think after 3 days of cutting, fighters are just ready to kind of have a nice cold drink, and that seems to be comforting. So I usually serve everything chilled.
Okay, that makes sense. And as I said, like on your website, which people can totally check out, you have amazing recipes. But one thing I know that a lot of people kind of hesitate with is, I see that it looks good and it probably tastes delicious, but is it going to take me like forever? And do I have to have 76 different ingredients to make this thing that's healthy and tastes good? So how do you find that balance where it's not super hard to make, but it still tastes pretty good?
Yeah, that's one of the things where that goes from client to client. I actually ask clients up front, what is your priority? Is it to have fun, creative foods that you look forward to eating? Or is it something that's easy, convenient, something that you can throw together? So I like to give people a range of those options. But at the end of the day, I like to keep things simple myself because, I cook a lot. I do have a family. I'm busy. I'm on the run. So I really personally don't want to take that long to cook anything. So everything is pretty simple. And like you said, straightforward, real ingredients. I have like a crispy skin salmon on there. That's literally just orzo, lemon, garlic, parsley, and salmon, 5 ingredients, but it looks elevated and it feels elevated. And I think that is a draw for people. One of the things, so I just started sharing the recipes recently with quarantine and all these fights getting canceled. I just really wanted a way to get people, I don't want to keep booking camps that continue to get canceled. So how can I get more information out to people, so they can start to work on those things now as they're maybe in between camps or waiting on a fight. So I just started posting those. It's been really fun. And now I'm working on a cookbook and it'll have those options in there. If you want something that's 30 minutes, it'll kind of show you that here are the recipes that you can make in 30 minutes or less, maybe a 1-pan or a crock pot recipe. So you can have those things. And really, a lot of times it's about planning ahead, knowing when you're going to the grocery store, being prepared to prep, knowing what meals that you're making. Those 3 things go a long way when it comes to just having good food more often.
And it sounds like it, where you think that you should probably eat multiple times throughout the day, like 5-6 times a day, not like 1 or 2 really giant meals?
Yes. And that's mostly, it's for training. When you don't want to feel sluggish and weighed down by big meals when you're training, but you also need to be fueled. And it's also for digestion. If you're eating those bigger meals, typically it slows down your digestion. And it's just a little bit harder to your body can only take so much from what you're eating and the rest you just kind of pass through. So making sure that you're eating small amounts where your body can digest it, absorb it, and then use it later throughout the day. So that is my philosophy. Every 2 to 3 hour, in 3-hour segment, how many calories are you burning? How many carbohydrates are you using? How much protein? And then putting that back in incrementally throughout the day. So typically I have fighters eating 3 meals and 2 to 3 snacks a day.
And so, with those 3 meals, 2 to 3 snacks, do you typically, like prep it on Sunday and kind of have everything laid out so it's super easy? Or do you break it up into 1 or 2 days and then cook, for 1 or 2 days more? How does that generally kind of lay out when you're working with folks?
Yeah, I'm on this Sunday and Thursday schedule right now where that's how I'm cooking for my fighters. And then that's also how I have my clients cooking for themselves. So getting the groceries on Sunday morning, prepping Sunday evening. So you've got meals through Monday through Thursday. And then again, doing another grocery order Thursday. I set my clients up with Instacart. So they have everything that they need to go in, purchase their groceries, and then make all the meals that are in the plan. So that's something that I really assist fighters with, is scheduling that time in, getting them the grocery list, getting them everything that they need so they can be prepared. Because that stuff does take a lot of time and planning. And that's one of the things that I do with my clients, is kind of take that off of their plate.
Perfect. And so, you mentioned you do work with clients. Do you have to be based in Colorado to work with you, or can you be anywhere, everywhere now in the online world?
Yeah. So I've been really excited to move more remote. So a lot of what I do right now is working with clients where we set up a fight camp plan. We schedule those meals in, we time them out, we make sure that all the macros line up, and then the fighters are actually responsible, for executing on the meals and making sure that they have those things. I've been fortunate to cook for a lot of people out here in Denver, but the thing is making it, I want everything to be super specific. So I used to cook for more people. Now it's like one client at a time, where we're really looking at everything we're putting into the body. We want everything to be at peak level. So then, the rest of the clients, we're just making sure that they can kind of do that themselves. And then that's nice too, because it's a more affordable option for a lot of people. And it's also teaching them independence and starting to understand their eating patterns, their routines, and how their body feels best.
And so if people want to connect with you, they're like, hey, they check out your website. Well, that stuff really does look delicious, which it does. You should go on your website. How do they connect with you? How do they, start to work with you?
Yeah, Instagram's been so great for me, people seeing things and then, coming in. So Instagram is a great way to connect through the website and through email. I'm always, it's even fun, even if people aren't looking for, a coach one-on-one, just following along with the content, having access to those recipes is really helpful. Or even just connecting with me. I always, I always want to make sure that people have what they need. So if people have questions, if you have one question or two questions about your camp or this weight cut, just always feel free to reach out. I love answering those questions and making sure that people have what they need. There's a huge need for this in the weight cut and the fighting world. So I just want to get some more information out there.
Perfect. And so if you want to connect with Layli, so she's Fuel Your Fight Camp on Instagram, right? And then on there also, she has a link to her website, which is where I've seen all of those delicious recipes, and I have made a few of them. They are really good, and they're not super hard. It's like a half-hour max and a couple of ingredients. So it's definitely something you can do, and if you're not like a professional chef like she is. Well,
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, check her out. She's awesome. She, like I said, works with lots of UFC fighters, a couple of Bellator fighters, and she really has this stuff dialed in, and her food is really, really good. So again, Fuel Your Fight Camp on Instagram, check her out. But I definitely want to thank you for coming on, Layli. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was really fun. Appreciate it.